How are you?
Hi, welcome. I'm so well. I'm so glad we got to talk last night. I want to, for those who are watching, introduce Inon Shampanier and his wife Natalie. They are co-authors of the really remarkably thoughtful film Paper Spiders, and Inon is the director of it. So, welcome to this forum. I'm so relieved I got to watch this last night alone and quiet in the dark and then recover before today because it was I'll gush for a moment here, and just so you know, I'm not always effusive. It's always very sincere. It was such a deeply personal, beautiful, and everything was so thoughtfully curated into it. There was nothing that was out of place or extraneous. And I have to just applaud you for actually talking about an aspect of mental health that isn't covered with such nuance and sensitivity. So this is, I'm just so excited to speak with you more about it and to hear more about the process and to talk about what I observed and found particularly striking as well. So
Thank you
we,
so much.
Thanks for those kind
yeah.
words. It's so sweet.
Oh no, it's really honest. So when did this whole process start for the two of you?
Was it two
The
and a
real
half?
process or the
Yeah,
writing
I guess that.
process? The Go ahead.
Oh no, I mean, I think that we started working on the script about 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
But and this one turned out relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Remember when we had our first conversation about it, and Natalie will talk about the true story that inspired it in a second. But I remember when we had our first conversation about it, that we said, this is a story that we really, as writers, would process the things that we care about, and it's something we really care about.
Yeah.
But it could be a very sad movie. So from the get-go, we said, oh, well, if you write this, we should find a way to balance it with comedy. And of course, walking that tightrope, that, finding that balance between comedy and drama, tragedy even, was important to us. But I guess we can backtrack it.
Yeah.
You can talk about what inspired it.
So yeah, sadly, it is based on a true or inspired by a true story with my mom and what she was going through. I'm a marriage and family therapist, which kind of made it harder because I knew that it was delusional disorder as she was going through it. But it's so difficult to treat family. It's virtually impossible. And also she was an amazing, caring, loving, sweet woman in every regard. And then the thing about delusional disorder is just when you broach that subject of somebody, being persecuted, and she thought actually a neighbor was stalking her. And that's when the person, because they're not aware that they have a problem.
Right.
So
right.
it's so hard to confront them or to bring it up even. And so that was kind of the most difficult part. But yeah, we were really secretive about it. We didn't tell anybody because, of the stigma of that. And then we weren't even planning on telling people that it's based on or inspired by a true story. And then as we started sending out the script, people were approaching us and telling us that they connected with this, they knew somebody, or they heard about this, or they have a loved one that's going through something very similar. And we realized how important it is to kind of talk about these stories and open up, and maybe we could help other people and reduce the stigma attached to it. But
I even remember people reading the screenplay and saying, oh, this is my story, this is what I went through with my mom, with my dad, with my sister, with a friend. And then we kind of felt compelled to say, well, this is also our story. And we realized that there's a therapeutic quality or cathartic quality to actually discussing it. And also, very sadly, there's a lot of shame that is attached to the subject of the illness. And we felt like talking about it can maybe help rid of that shame and just get people to discuss something that is important, especially when not talking about it can sometimes lead to not dealing with it, not seeking help, not seeking support. And support in this case is extremely important. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the things that I find so compelling about films that come from such a vulnerable and courageous place is that in you sharing that, you give other people permission to have their feelings, creating that common ground that you're talking about and destigmatizing and taking away the shame and making it really what it is, which is just another medical anomaly. You know, we don't shame diabetics for needing insulin. So why is it that we would shame somebody for what's happening in a very, you know, it's a very chemical thing, but also has to be dealt with talk therapy. And especially in our Western culture, we're not always so good about that wholehearted vulnerability. Yeah. So this is such and it is very funny for anybody who hasn't totally seen it. I think that's what it is. It's there's incredible pathos in the whole piece, and I think that we can see a lot of relationships that we have in our own lives through what you exhibited here. You know, so yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
and go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
No, I know that's good. The hard thing
No,
with Zoom.
I was saying we always aspire to try to create some thematic unity in the scripts that we write. So even with the other relationships in the story, like, you know, Daniel, the boyfriend, we decided to, you know, discuss something that is, while it's not mental illness, and addiction is, and alcoholism is definitely not mental illness, it still has some similarities in the sense that someone has a problem that very often, you know, they don't want to treat, or they don't really believe that is a problem, and trying to help them is a challenge. So we wanted even the subplots of the movie to somehow reflect that same theme of how do you help someone who either doesn't want to be helped or doesn't acknowledge that they have a problem, or
doesn't know to even acknowledge it because they don't know that this is even a problem. Like the world is wrong and they're right.
Yeah. Or someone where, you know, the problem is, their problems are just beyond your control. And it's hardest when the person is really a loved one, you know, a parent in this case, you know, a child-parent relationship that kind of turns tables in a way. The real story that happened, that as we were going through it, we were already, you know, married, so we had each other as a support system, you know, and our families. And Natalie's also a marriage and family therapist, so she's also a mental health professional. But we were thinking, what if someone went through this and they were alone? They didn't have the resources. And even, by the way, even with all the support system that we've had to deal with it, we still, you know, we're not able to get that thought across that, you know, and that there's a problem that needs to be confronted, because that's part of the sad ironies of paranoia, that if you try to tell someone that they have paranoia, then that only triggers more paranoia. So so that was a very difficult journey.
And also being a child going through it makes it even harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, a child that's lost their parent, you know, and that was probably the triggering incident. The way that you introduce it, nothing ever beats you over the head. It's kind of like you're watching a thread unravel something, and it just starts to pull and pull and pull faster and faster. And there is a very cyclical quality, or as you said, parallelisms to your storytelling with it as well, of the parent-child's, you know, relationship becoming flipped. And you have several different ways that you deal with this, but I want to continue on your thought process as well.
No, thank you, and thank you for noticing that. We love using parallels in stories, because especially when movies are a journey, it allows you to kind of stop for a second and consider where you were at different points in the journey. So even when we repeat, you know, shots, you know, for example, we see, you know, we kind of like that we shot that pushing of the airplane window as they're flying together at the beginning, and then later when Melanie's flying back to school alone, and and it just makes you think of, wow, what a journey we've been on, you know, between like this moment and that moment that look the same, but we've gone through such a journey in between, and then you see that same kind of shot repetition when the first time that Melanie comes to her mother's bed and kind of hugs her and tries to comfort her when she's going through her first, you know, very serious delusional episodes, and then later, after the mother ends up at the homeless alley, and she returns home and she lies in her bed, and, you know, we film her the same way. She's even, you know, putting her arm the same way, and that loss, that vacancy in her arm where she no longer has her mom, is just makes it more noticeable. And we also try to create parallels, even
The umbrella.
the umbrella, exactly.
I was going to say the yellow umbrella was like.
That's funny.
Yeah.
We were thinking nobody's ever going to notice. This is just for us.
Yeah.
Oh no! Right at the beginning. Well, there's something. The symbolism of yellow tends to be of craziness. I mean, did you know that? But yeah.
Yeah, so that was indeed a color that we chose to associate with it, and it's most evident with the umbrella. There are a few other uses in the film, but we decided, we'll open with an overhead shot that will show the umbrella and we'll show them under, and then even at the end, even when they're sitting by the pool, which is open for the first time after the and the pool also associated with the trauma of the father's passing, since he had a heart attack in the pool. And so for the first time, the pool is open, and it suggests that on some level they overcame the trauma. But then that umbrella and that and that reference to mental illness is still there on the side. It's never quite going away. It needs to be managed rather than cured, or rather you wish it could be cured, but as the psychiatrist says at the end, there's no cure, there's only management, there's only treatment. Yeah.
And even just her gaze as she's at the computer, there's this thing of this kind of looking upward and behind, that's fascinating. Or her, gosh, you use the rooftops so creatively. There's always this thing of something on the roof and going up on the roof, whether it's when she's up there and tells Melanie to guard all four sides at once, and you see that one tile come off and shatter at Melanie's feet, which is really, to me, I was like, things are breaking. Things are starting to shatter piece by piece by piece. And she's not only fighting something that's without, on the outside of her, the rooftop, she's banging at the ceiling. So that's so much of that internal strife coming out. And Melanie,
we tried to make a disintegration of the life around, like the flowers. I'm not sure if anyone noticed that, like this little
the
thing,
prom flowers.
And like where
Howard, and even the flowers that Howard gives her.
Gives her, and then they have flies around them later, so it's like a internal disintegration as well as external.
And disintegration and unraveling, the words that you both used were actually words that when we started working with a very talented DP, Zach Cooperstein, he told me that a part of his approach when he starts working on a movie is to try to find that one word that represents it. And it's actually quite a challenge when a story has so much to say and someone asks you, well, can you summarize it, sum it up in one word?
Right.
But it makes you think, and if I recall the words that we used, for the journey of the movie, or in many ways disintegration and unraveling, and we try to show that in different aspects, including the roof is an example, the flowers that that we later see with the flies, and and so that's definitely the most of the journey of the movie. But then toward the end, we wanted to be more optimistic about it. I had a screenwriting teacher once said, you can take an audience to hell, but you have to bring them back. So even though reality isn't always very, very optimistic, we wanted to have some hope at the end, but we didn't want to give false hope that she's cured and everything is perfect.
Right.
Which is where that shot that you mentioned, when she looks up and she has to think about it and she has to work on herself to tell herself that there's no problem. For us was very important, rather than just that she's done. Everything is
because that's fine. Real life. Like it'll never go away. Unfortunately, it's not just a magical pill that will stop things. It can only get better, but it's like management.
With intentional work. And I think that's something that I noticed in your film is, again, as we were talking about it. Yes, I think I picked up on most of those things because it was you set it out from the very beginning with just clear intentions. One of the first things that Don says to Melanie is, tell me how to be normal. At the very beginning. And you see that, the way that Melanie manages things. And, at the end, or towards the end, with prom, when she's talking to Daniel, she's actually telling him the things she can't say to her mother. You've got a problem. I can't help you. I can't help anybody. You need help. It's like that's the moment that he becomes kind of the surrogate for what she can't control with her other intimate relationship. And if you can riff on that if you want, but I'm just so excited about your film.
Thank you. Thank you. It's yeah, I mean, we can we can talk. Of course,
I'm
when you're being a
with,
professor,
yeah,
you
with
know,
your memory.
yeah,
I'm impressed with how much you remember.
Yeah.
And your
oh no,
wonderful.
I loved it. You know, it was one of those things. I took a couple notes, but when I'm really present in a film, it just kind of all sinks in. And especially since I had the pleasure of speaking with Inon last night, I was like, oh, everything's very intentional. I could get the person behind the lens. So as soon as I saw the yellow umbrella, I was like, okay, I get it. Where we are, or the way that they shared food. They were like Jack Sprat and his wife, you know, one took the other's things.
Yeah.
Meals were always shared. The way they did the crossword.
Exactly.
And Melanie having to say, stick to the vertical is this thing, and which then her mom sticks to the vertical, but it's all in her head, thinking everything's on the roof and coming at her. So it's this, again, I just kept seeing you building up that relationship and the depth of it and the textures within it, so that when it does disintegrate, we feel that loss. We feel that gone.
It was not only important for us to show a very loving and, you know, supportive and tight relationship,
but also enmeshed, like overly enmeshed, so that then when like things go awry, that
but it was so.
No, go ahead.
So it was it was not only very important for us to show it, but also both Lily and Stefania. Not only did they create a beautiful relationship on screen and off screen, but it was very important to them that the actors so often have like such great intuitions, and they really wanted to make sure that at the beginning we get a sense of that close, loving, real relationship, so that when it disintegrates, we really get to mourn the loss of something that was actually, you know, that was beautiful and was very loving. Because if we didn't build on that, not only I think would we not have the sympathy of and the empathy of the audience as much, but we wouldn't get to see the, you know, the full journey that they go through, from having you know, this very close and beautiful relationship to having, you know, to reaching really rock bottom at some points. And that
motherly bond they had also off screen. They were like naturally like mother and daughter, like so loving with each other, and they had that natural chemistry.
Yeah. Which is not something that you can predict as a director. When you cast, I mean, we knew when we cast them that we have terrific actresses, and you know, the moment we started working, we knew. I mean, they just poured their hearts and souls, and they gave the roles everything, and they really loved and cared about the project, and it really shows. But you can never guess how, you know, close the relationship of the actors will be, and whether they'll have chemistry, even if they're great actors. And they really hit it off instantly, and just created this mother-daughter bond that was just so believable. So we're very, very lucky with our actors, all of our actors, but of course our leads.
Oh yeah, they were exceptional. And I loved that you, Natalie, used the word enmeshed, because that's exactly what it was. Oh, I know, which then I'm like, I'll throw in individuation, which is what she has to go through in order to survive. You know, that parallel of, for instance, she takes her mom to the diner. She tries to make everything a little better. And I love that you used a rose-colored hue in that diner. It was very much that rose-colored glasses of, isn't this place so happy? And Dawn's saying, not for the people who work there. So then at the end, to see that this remarkable young woman who's already survived the sudden death of her father, and her mother not doing so great after that, and has worked and worked and worked, that she's not only caring for her mom, making the baked ravioli like her mom did. She's carrying on that weight of family tradition. And then also she becomes one of the unhappy people working in the diner that used to be a happy place.
Yeah. Oh, wow. You really noticed everything. I'm so honored that you noticed everything.
Oh, it's worthwhile. I mean, here's the thing. I was saying to someone last night, I was like, the least I can do is to really honor the filmmakers for putting something new and beautiful in the world, which is always a brave and bold endeavor, regardless of a critic's opinion, is to sit there and to really be present for it. And especially when you're mining something so clearly personal. That was just the type of thing you couldn't get through research. That came through the whole thing.
I think that was like liberating too, also to to write the story, you know, a little, especially since, like I said, like it's one of those things where you keep so close and you don't talk about, and then, you know, not just putting that like blocker, like not thinking, oh, you know, people are going to see this. This is just, this one's just for me. Like, that's really like the mentality that we kind of had going into it. This is just, you know, to process what's been going on. But, and then realizing afterwards that that is actually, okay, we need to open up about this.
Yeah. Which is funny because as we were going through it, we didn't even tell our closest friends. It just felt like, I mean, we just felt like it would be wrong to share that. Yeah. But and then of course, you know, we made a movie about it and shared it with the whole world. But we do believe, I mean, our hope going into it and opening up about it was really that in some way we'll be able to contribute even a little bit to public and private conversations about mental health and the need for support, because, you know, as you said, and we mentioned also in the movie, it's not that there's, you know, a magic pill that, I mean, of course, you know, especially in Western society, we, you know, we love pills as a way to like, oh, pop a pill and, you know, and the problem is gone. But
even if there's no problem, pop a pill.
Or have a drink, or, you know, trip out on some chocolate.
Exactly. But especially with this case, it's not that there's, you know, you take a pill and suddenly your thought process is normal. I mean, it really takes a lot of work and a lot of support, and in this case, the need for a support system, which, you know, entirely composed of one person who had to make sacrifices for it, was very evident. So we wanted to make that point and also show that it's not, I mean, that's not necessarily a happy ending. I mean, she has to give up, you know,
people were upset about that. Like, why would she give that up? But that's real life. Like, that's people make sacrifices with the people they love. And we wanted to like have, you know, even if it's maybe, you know, not ideal that she had to give that up, that Melanie had to give up college, that's real life, you know.
And she was thriving there, and she found a connection to her father.
Yeah.
That she said to her mom, I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. But that was like the kind lie that people have to invoke when they're dealing with mental health issues, and actually, if you're a caregiver for anybody, it's, you know, the Latin root of the word sacrifice is to make sacred, sacrifice. And so it's this sacred gift that she gives her mother after all that pain. It is such a grace-filled moment when she's looking out on her college experience that she worked her entire life on, and with all these impediments, and that it's not like she is just tossing it away. She just isn't a consistent process of mourning.
Yeah. But it was important, that scene that you mentioned. It was important for us to include it, even though it didn't necessarily move the plot forward as many other scenes do. But we felt like she went to USC on some level to connect with her father, having lost him, and having that story, having that professor who could give her a little piece of the puzzle, something she didn't know about her father. At least there was a little bit of satisfaction. Like, I went closure. There, I got something, and now, you know, she was maybe ready to go back to life as it was before. And at least she went there to get something, some connection with her dad, that she some missing piece, and she got it in a way. Obviously not the same as going there for 4 years, but at least she got something. So
and the thing is, the life before, you know, when you lose somebody, and she, of course, as you mentioned, she loses her mom before she loses her mom. There is when people are like, you really don't get over grief. You cross over a threshold from which you're always changed. And so we see her cross these multiple thresholds, because when someone dies, like her father, it's not just the human body that goes, it's the relationship you had and what they knew of you that no one else knows. So it almost felt like this surrogate professorial moment. It was like she was getting a reflection back of a piece of herself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell? I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's really like the biggest pleasure that a filmmaker can have, to actually have such a you know, such an in-depth conversation about the film. Of course, when you write it, you know, you put all those little details that you hope people will pick up on, but then very often, you know, they don't, or maybe they do on a more subconscious level, and they just you know, take it all in as part of the whole experience, but don't necessarily notice the little building blocks of the story.
At least the first time they watch it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's almost a handoff that happens. That moment in the doorway when Dawn is meeting Howard and Daniel comes to pick up Melanie, that almost seems to be the moment where the roles really switch between mother and daughter, because the unraveling seems to come faster for Dawn, and she's suddenly not sleeping in her home. And that's also when this closeness comes between Daniel and Melanie. I just think it's, there, like I was saying, there's a handoff. Was that intentional? Or
yes, that was like the last, because when Melanie went to the therapist and they said, just try to, I forgot the wording even, but like basically just try to like
reduce anxiety in her
keep
life.
her occupied,
right.
Yeah.
Reduce anxiety in her life. Yes. So
which also is inspired by Orange Truth.
Yeah.
That was one of the many failed strategies we attempted.
Yeah, and then it's almost like the more you try, sometimes it just ends up blowing up in your face. But in this case, like that was kind of like the last thing that she tried, and then it completely, like you said, started unraveling from. That was like her midpoint, like where everything just went downhill from there.
A very naive attempt at trying to cover up a problem. And we were, I don't know if I would say guilty of that, but that was just like one of many things that we tried. We thought,
so many strategies.
She was divorced, she was alone, and we thought, oh, maybe if she had something else in her life, she wouldn't obsess so much about the neighbor. And that worked for a week.
Yeah, the dating scene is real, like that. That you create a profile, you force them into it. Oh, this can distract, this can take away the problem. But
then it doesn't. Of course, the problem is so much deeper.
Yeah, but she had there's such a, like, Melanie is so completely herself. I love that she doesn't suffer fools. I love that she's also patient enough to see beyond, the rich kid, kind of like an almost 80s movie rich kid trope. Like he was a little bit like James Spader in Pretty in Pink meets the other character. And it that sense of trying to buy his way into her heart, but then actually seeing something of her. And then her again, the generosity of creating a dating profile for your mother when you're a teenager, that takes an extraordinary young woman who in her free time watches surgery. Super analytical, it's remarkable, who's always pushing herself and always trying to be better. But also she had a quality that wasn't extremely judgmental, because she's got her friend who's kind of like a high school bicycle that everyone's taking a ride. And how she deals with that as well.
And we wanted to, rather than begin the movie in a landscape that is very serious and dramatic and heavy and has the same tone of the middle end of the movie, we felt like life doesn't happen in genres. I mean, we all live through, we don't live life in a genre. And we told ourselves, when she begins her journey, she's not, yes, the loss of the father 2 years prior is definitely looming in the background. And that storm that we see, come and go right before the titles. And of course, we then see it, unfold, the King Lear type of, there's a psychic storm, in the horizon, and it's definitely going to rain. But when she begins her life at the beginning, she's living a fairly normal life. She's this college is a last year of high school, and she's kind of living in this high school dramedy kind of a world, and she doesn't expect it to turn dark any more than the viewers do, hopefully, unless they're listening to these conversations and trailers in advance. But she begins life in it's full of those tropes of high school and coming of age, and it seems like it's just comedic and fun. And then gradually the fun is pulled away from her and from us as viewers, and the problems start becoming more and more real, and the tone takes a shift toward the dark.
Yeah, and both Daniel and is it Lacey who's the best friend?
Yeah.
There are these beautiful young kids who are clearly filling gaps in their own lives, one through the distraction of like sex and making out, and another mistake, or a mistake about to happen, I think, which I loved that. And then Daniel, who, you know, you do see the element of his own pain and isolation from his parents, that he's not enmeshed with them, but he learned the alcoholism and probably has the predisposition to the addiction from his mom and then an absent father.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we really tried to make every character have some real psychological wound, just like real life. But
I
even
was like humans.
like what?
Like humans, like
Yeah,
humans
exactly.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we worked hard with each character, like, well, what is there, even if they're, you know, a small character. Even Gary, the detective, his dad so he had experienced alcoholism because of his dad. So like taking like characters and making them real, like each one, even if they don't have, you know.
And he proves to be at the end of the story a different character than he appeared to be at the beginning.
Totally.
Yeah, we try even with, you know, the smaller characters to give them to surprise the viewer a little bit with things that you may not expect.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm really glad you brought up Gary, because anybody who knows Max Casella, going back to Doogie Howser, you know, I grew up with him, that he comes off like he's taking advantage initially, and you see him really try to advocate for reality and advocate for Melanie, and to see Dawn. And it is so much what happens with somebody with personality disorders that cement them in an alternate reality, that she's able to find a workaround even with the facts in front of her.
Yeah.
Which is also taken from reality to the extent that no matter what evidence you present to someone with paranoid delusions, they will just, you know, see through the filter of their own delusion. Yeah,
this is why that. Yeah. This is why I'm, you know, seeing it in the world. And it's really sad for the person going through it, because to not be believed by everyone else, to feel like you're alone, and to just be so convinced that, you know, this is my reality, everyone else is turning on me, even the ones I love most, my family.
It's probably the biggest tragedy of this thing, the idea that someone is in their reality, they're living through a nightmare, they're being tormented and tortured by someone, and even their loved ones don't care
or don't believe them.
Yeah,
so frustrating.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's both sides it's hard.
And you know, you didn't reduce Melanie to just a smart kid. You know, you gave depth to her, and watching her go through the ritual of, again, making the baked ravioli for her mom, taking it out to her car, everything she was managing and holding together, and to see her go through the ritual of putting on her mother's dress and getting ready and looking so beautiful for prom, and having this deep and tender moment with Daniel, and then to have, literally, for her to be, you know, naked and vulnerable, and then to have cops roll up. And I honestly thought that was going to be the end of the degradation that she went through. And then the graduation, the flip. I was just like, I don't know, my heart can't take it.
I know, you know. Yeah, we don't let people get off easy.
We put the audience through a lot, but it was, I would say, even more than you know, the writing or the directing, it was really the acting. And of course, with, you know, with Lily Taylor, you know, we've known her work for so many years, and we just knew that she would be fantastic. There are a few actors who can just dial it up to 100 and have that level of intensity and commitment. And she was, I think, a couple of years before we wrote the movie, we saw her in American Crime, and she was so good. I think she was in season 2 and 3 of American Crime, and we just said, oh wow, we have to find, you know,
said one day
we'll work with Lily Taylor, and every script we wrote, we're like, oh, maybe this one's for Lily Taylor. So then, you know, when we wrote this one, so when we wrote this one, we knew she would be fantastic. But then when it came to the girls' role, we didn't really know who would be and we actually saw, we auditioned many girls, and many of them were wonderful, but for some reason they just didn't quite feel right, even in a way that is hard to put in words. And then I think that Stefania Owen, who plays Melanie, was the maybe person number 80 to send in an audition tape.
And it was the one tape. It's like every time we'd get like 10 auditions, and this is like, he's like, it was like a movie. This is the last one that rolled in, and that was the one. I mean, that felt like, it was just, I mean, it wasn't the last one because we chose her, but
I mean, there would be 100 more.
But it was we only got one that day.
Yeah.
And that was her.
And I believe I believe you're in the bedroom and I was in the office. We're both working and we're watching it individually. And then we like ran to each other and we're like, so we have our Melanie, we found the one. And we really did. We even didn't know at the time how incredibly sensitive and right for the role she was. And she and Lily were both terrific. I've never had the experience that in some of the scenes, like the police scene. I mean, I've had, even though you know that I mean, you have cameras and lights and crew, and you know that it's not real. But we had crew members, you know, in tears as the scene was going on, and I've never had that experience. But it was so they brought something so raw and emotional and real to the role that is something that you really, I mean, you thank your lucky stars when you have actors like that.
Yeah, and she was something that I really loved too was that she actually looked like a teenager. She was wholesome. You didn't glam her up.
I love that.
You didn't take away her hair.
Yeah, she's still,
yeah, and she's not that. You know, we've gotten so used to these Instagrammed little girls posing, and that she had. I felt like I recognized her as a friend, or you know, this very wholesome quality that she had, and again that she was so completely herself.
Yes, she's exactly the same off camera. Like she's such an incredible actress to the point that like you're like, I don't know if she's acting even, because this is how she is. Like, I mean, she's that
extremely
kind and
authentic,
sweet and
kind and sweet and open. You know, when you talk to her, she just, you know, when she makes eye contact, she just you feel like the channels are open,
and every scene she nailed, like she was so consistent. Like we do it again, and she was so, and she took direction and notes so well. She was both of them. They were
it just came from a real place for both of them. And I mean, of course, they're Lily and Stefania, and you know the rest of the cast are extremely talented. But there's another level of it that I think maybe has to do with how deeply an actor cares about the story and the subject matter, and they really they really poured their hearts into the roles. So yeah, we're very
you could tell, and they couldn't have. The thing is, anybody who's worked on any or all sides of the camera, especially actors, there has to be such a very safe space, and that phrase has gotten used so much, but a safe space that's created to do that kind of work. So that really speaks to what you both were bringing as, you know, writer, as director, with your own experience, because it did just feel like, you know, the walls went away and we were in on the action, just seeing these things unfold. And I do think that Lily Taylor was an absolute revelation. I've always felt like she was an actress that I knew the quality of the film before I would see it, when I know that she was in it, and I never understood why she wasn't more of a marquee name, except that I think she kept to her own integrity and chose things that were interesting and not necessarily mainstream.
Yeah, to be a real actor's actor rather than a celebrity, that was always very important to her. And but she really is this. I'm amazed by the level of intensity that she could bring to the role. She could really dial it up to 100, and then in between takes somehow preserve that, and still, you know, have you know, normal conversation, obviously, but I could feel that she's holding on to something. She's putting herself in those shoes in that moment in a way that requires, especially when you're playing mental illness, and especially when it's a subject that's close to your heart, is a major challenge. I mean, you're really putting yourself in that world, in that state of mind, which is not an easy state of mind to inhabit. So I was amazed by her performance.
Yeah, all of it. That the scene with the police, the quiet, I want her to hear this, and for her to say the most devastating thing, and then the scene in that homeless alley, for Melanie to be showing up and using what was obviously their love language of, I brought you food.
Yeah.
And I brought you a sweater, because you see them shopping earlier. That she's literally trying to grasp onto the things that were a part of their reality. Yeah. And for her mom not to take that on is just stunning.
Yeah.
That also very sadly is I mean, the idea of the food that you mentioned a few times, also taken from reality. I remember when Natalie's mom was so pained by what she was going through, and you know, and food wasn't a priority remember, Natalie making her, like, pasta and lasagna and things to really fill her up, because she was very concerned about her health and her well-being. So those turning tables and shifting roles of mother and daughter were really something that was very built into the DNA of the story from the beginning.
Yeah.
Mm. And it is so funny. I don't want people to think that it's so funny. That totally inept counselor.
Michael Clayton, also fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, he was wonderful, and her kind of incredulity with him, just like really. But that even in his ineptitude, he was able to find this one nugget. But it really was funny when he's like, "Oh wait, harm. Then I have to tattle on you."
Yeah.
And then
and he interrupts her for that. She's like on another screen.
And that was also, I mean, we mentioned the challenge for us to, finding the balance between comedy and drama, but same for actors, and perhaps for Michael Cyril Creighton, who played Mr. Wessler so wonderfully. He was really walking a tightrope of I mean, it was clearly a funny scene, and he was so funny in it, but you also want to believe the counselor, and you want to believe that person, while being inept, is still a real character and not just
a joke.
A joke. And also you want to get a sense that he does care, even if he can't help much. So that was a very fine line to walk, and he walked it so beautifully.
Yeah.
And it is one of the funnier moments in the story. And we really tried, especially with our supporting roles, to pepper in comedy, because of course we brought Tom Papa, who's a comedian, and he's so funny, and anything he says, we just crack up.
And a lot of times we had to take out jokes. Like it's hard for me. Like I love comedy, so it's hard to. I have to make an effort to be serious sometimes. So we had to like reread it many times, and okay, this is too light. This is too funny. Like it's too, not suiting the genre.
But I think that our strategy from the beginning, we said on some level, because even her mom was such a sweet and fun-loving person and loved to joke around, and we always had fun with her. Whenever we would meet, we would joke, and she had a quirky sense of humor. So, and some of it was a little neurotic, but in a Woody Allenish kind of a way, kind of like like we would meet and and go over safety instructions for what to do on an airplane. So, kind of like and she was.
We were going on an airplane.
Yeah,
like
we were
ever,
going on an airplane. So some of it was funny. So I think that we told ourselves as a general strategy from the beginning, well, neurosis could be funny, but then the psychosis is not. And that shift from quirky neurosis to serious psychosis is the balance between comedy and drama.
And then it tracks too, because we didn't want it to come out of nowhere. So we had to build it in. There were little things that we built in the beginning so that it doesn't come out of nowhere, like the Uber driving, knowing where you live, just things that
tip him well. Yeah,
which is true, because a lot of people will have like different types of personalities, like either suspicious or things like that are like they're not on a harmful level, but that coupled with maybe a triggering incident could evolve into something a lot more.
And the better you know the person, the less obvious the warning signs are, obviously, because you feel like, oh, they're just being themselves. They say something that is a little suspicious, and like, oh, they're just themselves. And then gradually you don't feel the lines blurring, and in a way you
enable it too. If you know, wow, I sound like such a therapist. You enable it, but if you love the person and care for them, you naturally and you know the personality, so you think, oh, they're just being themselves. Right. And then that's kind of also enabling it to a point that then at some point you can't, because it gets out of control.
And even as an outside person, you don't even necessarily know what is true and what isn't. If someone tells you that there's a neighbor who's very hostile, maybe there's truth to it. And at first, there's no reason to believe that there isn't. But then gradually, as the stories start becoming more far-fetched, suddenly you even wonder about other things that they've said, what is true and what isn't. And I feel like, in general, we live in a especially now that everyone is isolated and locked up and just listening to different accounts of what may be happening online. We're all living with a certain state of paranoia.
How can you not be? You go outside and this thing kills you. Like, how do you not?
Yeah. And every channel and every person has a different interpretation of what's going on, and it's very easy for people to live in paranoia. So maybe now the story is even more relatable to people. And sadly, of course, with COVID and the rates of mental health and the severity of symptoms goes up. So sadly, I think that this is only becoming more relatable to people.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. And I think your point too, that people who are close to it, it's like putting a frog in water and turning the heat up slowly. You don't notice until it's at a boil because you're just used to the shifting water. It's so small and almost imperceptible. And to that point, it's interesting because I was thinking about Howard, who she goes on a date with and is like, "Can I sleep at your house?" This poor sweet man who's been through the ringer is like, yeah. Then he realizes that he's like, this isn't quite normal. And then Bill, her boss,
David Rasche,
having
also wonderful.
Oh, he's wonderful. He's on Succession.
Succession and Veep, and it used to be Sledgehammer in the Golden Years, and then in the Loop. It's been in so many different shows and movies.
But that he's the person who says to Melanie, like, "Where have you been?"
Yeah.
Which shows the same point, that very often the person who's closest to a loved one doesn't notice the things that an outside observer would.
Yeah, and because our only introduction to Dawn is through Melanie, we're just like her, where we're like, wait, this is a new thing. This is just amping up, rather than it's been this, undercurrent that just gets re-triggered by the anxiety of her daughter.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to the fact that when you're little, growing up with your parents, like they're your parents, so everything they do is normal, fine. And then you grow up to become an adult, and you're like, wait a minute, I don't know if that's, maybe. I'm not saying that's the case for me, but I know that a lot of people have that experience where things are dormant, or you just assume that they're normal, and then you kind of,
you
as
don't
you
know
grow,
you don't know any different. Any better.
You see things through different eyes.
Well, because now we're talking about, because of the current leadership in the country, there's a lot of talk. People are throwing around the word personality disorder a lot, narcissism a lot. There's gaslighting. These are terms that people only really knew, if you were into films and liked the film Gaslight, or if you were somebody who, read books called like Walking on Eggshells or Surviving the Borderline Mother. Unless you had somebody giving that to you, it just wasn't part of the lexicon. And now we're in this place. So for you to come to a very different one, something that when seen from the outside is seen as crazy or insidious, and to deal with it with compassion and intimacy is really important. And what was this process like for you in terms of, you talked about actually putting it out there, but as you're seeing it come to life, was it a bit like reliving things for you both, or?
It was hard. It was hard. I think it's two parts. Like, one is that at least I'll speak for me, like I had to turn off that part that, people are going to see this. Like, I really had to, for me, just write, like, this is for me, and this is a processing thing, and I'm writing, my truth. But, and I know, and it's similar for both of us.
Of course.
When I say I write, I mean we write. But
no, it's but it's true that on some level, when you're writing something truthful, you're wearing two hats. You're both the person who went through this, but you're also the writer, and you're viewing it. Okay, so this is the plot, and these are the protagonists, and these are the plot points, and but it's a balance.
Yeah, and there's guilt, and but then again, you hope that you can help other people. Like, if I saw this movie when I was going through it, maybe I could have done things differently. And I hope that I've talked to some people after this movie that they were literally going through the same thing with their mom. And it's nice to feel like maybe you help them, and it's not as, you feel like you're the only person in the world going through it when you are.
Yeah.
And you're not. And I've never seen a movie that dealt with this. So I hope that it could touch people.
Yeah. that was really our hope going into it. And even, yeah, I mean, you mentioned guilt, and we really, I mean, of course, you know, when her mother was going through this, we never wanted to bring it up. But even afterwards, we did feel guilty about sharing this very personal and not, you know, very happy story. But we really hope that, you know, by sharing it will help someone, you know, help some people, you know, or at least open up a conversation that's, you know, maybe.
And I think that we were naive enough to think, if we're not writing it's based on a true story, nobody will know. We're not saying that at the beginning.
Yeah.
We're not saying inspired by, I mean, but I feel like the first few people that read it were like, so this, where did this come from? It's your life? Oh, shoot. It's really hard to like keep that in. But yeah, it's bittersweet, the journey, I would say. Like it's,
yeah. Bittersweet healing. And like I said earlier, you put things in there that you can't get from research. It's that felt, lived, you know, thing. Even the fact that you were able to deal with it with humor, if that is a personal coping mechanism. And Inon last night said that you were a very funny person. So that was, I was like, I getting to then watch the movie after, I was like, oh, wow, I like it, Natalie. You and I need to have a beer someday. You know, there was something really, just like I said, authentic and organic about the whole thing, but also so artistic. Your lighting, your cinematography was beautiful. The angles showing the relationships in the subtle ways. What I loved was that there wasn't an ounce of pretension. It felt intentional without being self-aggrandizing or too self-conscious about it. It's that fine line of having meaning and symbolism and intention without it being like, there was no point that I rolled my eyes at anything.
Our cinematographer Zach Cooperston did a beautiful job with the movie and lensing it, and from the get-go, our conversations were very much about, you know, keeping it real, and on the one hand, even though one aspect of it is not real, which is a paranoia, so we allowed ourselves to slightly dip into tropes that are a little bit, I wouldn't say horror film like, but, you know, a little bit more thrillerish. And you see that, you know, with those wide lens shots, you know, on her face as she, you know, pulling back as she was walking around, hearing something, you know, on the roof. But then, and a little bit when Melanie finds herself in her mom's shoes, dealing with, you know, paranoia that is induced by the marijuana. But
and darkness too. We made sure that like certain scenes were darker because she was feeling dark, and then when they're out in the diner, like you mentioned, it was brighter and lighter. So we tried to keep
But going back to that one word that Zach asked me to choose at the beginning, and the idea of disintegration. Also, the story begins with a lot of two shots that just show the two of them, and they're sharing the same frame. They're doing activities together. They're watching TV together. You know, they're sitting doing the crossword puzzle, etc. And then throughout the movie, we lose that. They become, you know, they're, even when they are together, you know, they're very broken apart. And then at the very end of the psychiatric hospital cafeteria, we finally regain that. And I think that we regain some sense of composure again, of composition that is even and satisfying again, and hopefully visually also suggests that you know, we're back to the starting point, or perhaps even if we're at a different place, it's still the togetherness is back.
Hopefully not the starting point, because then there'd be a sequel that did the
right.
Revenge of the neighbor.
Right, exactly. Coming back from the dead. That seems to be the only thing that breaks her up.
Oh no, we chose not to show throughout the movie. We never really see his face. We never really see him. And part of why we wanted to do that was to kind of give us the sense of what she's doing. First of all, the fear is so much greater than the person himself. I mean, the idea is someone, and whenever you see a person, and it makes it real, it also makes it, you know,
legitimizes
But even beyond that, the idea that there's this ominous person that you don't quite see, it contributed to us being in Don's mindset of like, oh, there's this person who only, you know, we may have just like seen through the window, and we see the shadows and we see the tree, you know, as
and maybe he's not real. Maybe it's paper spiders. Maybe it's, you know, in your head.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and you never show the monster in horror. The
Yeah.
second you show the monster,
The
no
Jaws,
matter
yeah.
how, great industrial light and magic is,
Yeah.
you just you lose that. So I thought that was fantastic. And the fact that you also um that you showed, and this is just a quick link because I know we need to wrap up, but the ways that you showed her financial struggle and her isolation, I thought were so interesting. I mean, just a quick, glance over bills or the lights going out on prom. But one scene that I thought was so beautiful was her at college. And she's surrounded by this sea of lights and laptops, and she's writing with pen and paper in the dark.
You really do notice everything. I'm amazed. That's
Yeah.
It's a good movie, man. It's really good. And I was so sorry to hear that you all suffered a loss of someone crucial to your team as well, and what that has to be like with you.
Christian. We had two wonderful producers on the movie, Ann Clements and Ash Christian, and they really, we couldn't have been luckier with such supportive and wonderful producers. They're also friends, and they've made many films together. And sadly, we lost Ash.
And he was so young. He was 35.
Yeah.
Like, and just the nicest person you'll ever meet. Like such a good soul.
We're planning to make many more movies with him and Anne, and unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But at least he was. He accomplished a lot in his 35 years and made many independent films. And it was such a lively, fun person and touched so many lives. Yes. We recently had an online memorial for him, and so many people showed up, and everyone had a story, and everyone who even met him briefly seemed to have created a close relationship with him. So, and it was really the experience of making the movie was really wonderful. I mean, there's such a nice group of friends who came together to creatively collaborate. And there was a lot of kindness on set.
Trickled down because they
their
were
personalities. It was a very, very friendly, fun set to work on. And we had such a terrific crew in Syracuse, and we get nostalgic about the time that we made.
I bet. Well, what a quick turnaround that you started writing it 2.5 years ago, and here it is out in the world. Where does it go next after Portland?
It's actually playing at the Warsaw Film Festival right now. So
wow.
So I believe that it's playing, and there's the movie theaters, even though we don't get to go to be there. But tonight and tomorrow we'll be playing at the Warsaw Film Festival, and then next I think that we have Twin Cities and St. Louis coming up, and Ojai. So we're doing the festival circuit, and happy to, even though we're all isolated and don't get to be in a physical theater with people, who still enjoy the fact that we can share it with audiences and connect and have conversations like these.
In a way, reach more people because it's online, and so many more people I feel like can join than in person. So there's a silver lining.
And then after the festival circuit, then real distribution. But for now, it's nice to just share it with select audiences in festivals and have conversations like this. This was such a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, I know. I'm so sad to have to wrap it up. I could sit here all day with both of you, and I hope to keep up with you in the future. But
I'd love that. Let's have that beer that you're talking about.
I know. That would be great. Well, we'll definitely talk offline and keep the conversation going, because I think your film is not only artistically really beautiful and compelling, but it's important. And I say that not in that it's an important piece of film place. It's important in a world that's really needing a little bit more empathy, just a little bit more softness in general. And so I wish you both the best, and that we continue to connect in the world. And thank you for your generosity of your time, and most of all, sharing such a very intimate experience with me and with other audiences. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much for your wonderful analysis, and this interview was like the best one we've had, honestly.
Oh, well, I will, I'll take that home to the bank. I enjoyed it. No, you're most welcome. I mean, this is, I was brought on to the festival this week. So I'm also a filmmaker and a storyteller. And so I understand what goes into these things. So I just appreciate you. Well, we'll continue talking elsewhere. Thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, paper spiders, I wish it all the best. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.